Hi, welcome to one of the Western Hemisphere Regional Governance webinars. My name is Marnie Hall and I am one of the Western Hemisphere Regional Governance Consultants. And with me today...
My name is Angela Dawson. I am the second consultant with Marnie. And I hear you had a confession to make.
I do.
Oh, do I want to hear this one?
So, I love top 10 lists.
Really?
Top 10 lists about anything. Fashion, music, movies, food.
Do you think you could put a top 10 list on, like, governance?
What about succession planning? So, the top 10 succession planning practices, not gonna lie, super excited.
All right, let's go.
Let's get started, all right? Okay, so what exactly is succession planning? As per the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development in Europe, succession planning can be broadly defined as identifying potential leaders to fill key positions. This means that your MO has a plan in place that it is implementing. The plan allows your MO to determine who can best fill a key position. Should the person who's currently in that position no longer be able to continue or be formally replaced. Now, for the purpose of this webinar, we will restrict the key positions to the members of the National Council, Executive, or Board. Your MO may have a number of different names for this group, but for this discussion, we're going to use the word council. Replacing a council position does not happen overnight.
Really?
No.
Don't we wish?
Sometimes, but it has to be done right. And it needs to be planned, and that's why it's called succession planning. That planning includes a number of items. The first part of the planning is knowing the key positions in your MO. These should be outlined in your constitution. And I should say, throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. We might also throw a few polls at you. So here's a poll. How many of you have your constitution and have seen it?
Ooh,
okay.
I'm not sure about that one. It appears not that many of you do.
Right, but you should have easy access. Your MO should share this document with you. An MO's constitution is a key document, and it is a very useful tool for succession planning, as it should define the process for the selection of new and remaining council members. Another part of planning is analyzing the positions and knowing what skills, competencies, and experiences are needed for each one. This should be based on the direction of your MO and any issues that may be affecting it in the near future. We recommend using your strategic plan, which every MO should have, so that to identify these items. You will also need to identify candidates for the position within your MO and outside of it, or a commonly used phrase is uniform and non-uniform, who have the needed skills and experiences.
I think, Marnie, we're going to touch on that a little bit later, aren't we?
We absolutely are.
Great.
And lastly, you need to plan for how you will develop and recognize the candidates and volunteers that you have identified in key positions. We will also talk more about this later.
Oh, I'm glad, because that's one we often forget.
Absolutely. So, Angela, can you tell me a little bit about why succession planning is important?
Absolutely. And I think first off, succession planning really should be a top priority for any organization, whether that be a guiding organization, Girl Scouting organization, non-governmental institutions, corporations, because when it's actually well executed, people are prepared and ready to take on the new leadership roles. And you want to make sure that you have that within your organization. People who are well prepared will be knowledgeable and likely much more committed to the organization. And on their side, they'll really feel as if they're a valued member of the organization. Additionally, succession planning has both long-term and short-term benefits, and those are important for us.
Absolutely.
It ensures, first off, that the people have the critical skills to replace someone who may have to relinquish their position. And I'm sure you can all imagine a few scenarios where somebody had less time to dedicate to Girl Guiding or Girl Scouting that they had originally planned.
Sometimes people have babies or need to care for an elderly parent or have to leave the country for a brief period of time.
And we have that example in a number of the countries that we're working with.
Yes.
So yes, the situation is, what do you do when somebody leaves? And really, that's up to the member organization, as it must ensure that the tasks are completed during the person's absence. In the longer term, succession planning allows your member organization to develop a successor for a very specific position and ensuring that they will be effective and efficient once they take on the new role. And lastly, it also provides stability to the member organization. People will feel less overwhelmed when they take on that new role. Just imagine if you've already had a fair bit of training and you know what you're getting into and you know the ins and outs of it. It's a much, much easier transition for someone. You may have been part of previous decision-making discussions. You may have a whole historical side to issues. That makes it much easier. If you've had development opportunities and you've received more support, isn't that an organization you'd want to stay with?
Absolutely.
So, Marnie,
yes,
you had said you could do a top 10 for anything.
Absolutely, and I've got the top 10 for succession planning, and let me tell you, it is BuzzFeed worthy. A succession planning committee, ongoing function, committed, engaged chief commissioner, skills, competencies, and experiences. Number 5, council member skills inventory. 6, ongoing development. Term limits, position terms, transparent elections, and number 10, committee renewal.
And if I know you, we're going to chat about each one of those.
Absolutely. Right? So let's dive in. Let's start with succession planning committee.
All right. Well, why don't I take that one? Because this one I can figure out.
Oh, all right.
All right. So it's really, really important for your member organization to have a group or a committee in place and really on a permanent basis that's responsible for succession planning. Because succession planning can mean lots of different things and can include lots of different aspects. In addition to what we've already talked about, it can also include ensuring that there's good governance, that rules and constitutions are followed and changed as needed. So don't keep a document from the 1950s just because it exists.
Yeah.
And that the volunteers are recognized. The committee should ideally be made up of people with strong networks, and that as a group, they're knowledgeable about the member organization, human resources, personal development, and they may even need to have somebody with a legal background.
Sure.
The exact skills that will be required will really depend on the specific aspects of the responsibilities that this committee has. Now, Marnie, I said that this needed to be something that was on a permanent basis.
Right.
Can you maybe add on to that?
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about ongoing function. When we think of succession planning, especially in the context of councils, we tend to think of it as needing to find people to fill a position because an election is upcoming. There are, however, many reasons to be looking at succession planning as an ongoing basis. Is your MO able to handle a sudden departure of one of the key council members? So imagine that your MO is a business.
That's what we all want, right? We want to bring something professional across and look that way.
Absolutely. So how long do you think a business can survive without a CEO or a treasurer?
Not long.
Every organization has an idea about who can fill any key position at any point in time. However, this does not mean that the new person knows all the ins and outs of the position, but rather that they have the skills and are provided ahead of time with knowledge to take over the position. Try this at your next council meeting. Ask all of the members to list the people that they think could replace them, and then ask for a show of hands as to how many were readily able to identify someone. If you are got a healthy succession plan thinking, every hand should be in the air. That said, if we consider that succession planning is ongoing, what are some things that we can do to make this more of a reality? Do you use every opportunity to talk to people outside of your organization about what your MO is doing? What tone do you use? Do you talk about all of the excellent experiences, or Are your comments more about the infighting and the hours you spend in meetings?
Oh, I hope not.
I hope not. I hope everyone's sharing the positive stories out there. Do you work with some non-guiding and scouting organizations or educational institutions where someone may be looking for a volunteer opportunity or a specific experience that they can get by partnering with your MO? Do you pre-identify people who could take on other roles, much like that quick pulse poll we just talked about, and share information with those possible new people and invite them to specific functions so they can kind of dip their toe in the experience? And once they're on board, you can provide them with specific training. And do you strategically nominate people to specific committees to give them experiences that they need? Do you also have a list of skills, say a matrix, of competencies and experiences that your council needs? If so, how do you have a list of people who have those skills that could maybe fill a vacant position? Do you know what skills you're missing?
That would be the gap.
That would be the gap. And, we have a really great webinar about doing a skills audit. And we would absolutely recommend that you take a listen to that one, which really gives you some very concrete examples and concrete actionable items you can do to really identify that gap. Do you delegate your duties to give others meaningful experiences? But remember, if you delegate, that doesn't mean the responsibility is gone. You are still responsible for the things that you signed up and that you committed to. These are just ways in which you can look at succession planning more than just once a year.
Marnie, when we're talking about all of these, really we're looking to see that somebody is overseeing this. And we really want to make sure that our chief commissioner is engaged.
Absolutely.
And it's really important that it's the chief commissioner, because really the engagement needs to come from the very top of the member organization.
It does.
And all our Girl Guiding and Girl Scouting organizations are volunteer led. That's part of how we're all structured. So we need to look for the top volunteer. Top volunteer is chief commissioner. So really she's the one that's going to have to set that direction for the organization. So absolutely make sure that she's part of this process. So I guess the next question for me becomes, well, how do I really know if she's engaged?
Exactly.
And maybe we can come up with a couple of examples on that one as well. I guess first off, do you actually see that she communicates the need to plan for the future? Is she looking ahead, or is she really bogged down in the day-to-day activities that are going on?
And are those activities actually the activities that she needs to occupy her brain space with?
Absolutely.
Or can she delegate those to a subcommittee to deal with them?
Yeah. So she's really got to be looking towards the future and even already starting to think about who could step into the role of chief commissioner when she's done.
Yes.
Does she really know the skills and the competencies of everybody that's on her council? And does she make sure that the members are placed in roles where they can be the most effective, right? It's up to her to make sure the organization hums and runs along really well. So is she placing the people properly? Is she giving people opportunities to learn new skills? Is she coaching them for success?
Right.
Is she really making sure that both human and financial resources have been allocated and that they're made available for whatever those succession planning needs are? We're hoping that your chief commissioner displays some, and even more so, all of these characteristics. But is she also challenging others to think the same way?
She does. She is the person who leads the organization.
She really
She
is.
sets the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about making sure that she was aware of skills and competencies. And I know those words are really tough, and we mix them up sometimes. And I noticed they were on your list. Can we look at those?
Sure. So we've talked about skills, competencies, and experiences several times. Having people with the right combination of these three key things, it contributes to successful succession planning. So let's take a look. So skills. Frequently, the words skills and competencies are used interchangeably, but they are in fact two different things. It's easier for us to use an example. Let's use communication. A person can be a good presenter through practice, learning from others, and education. But in order to be a strong communicator, one must rely on a combination of skills plus behavior and knowledge. A person can learn to be a good presenter. This is a competency. But only a strong communicator has advanced language skills and the knowledge of diverse cultures and behaves patiently when communicating. This combination makes them skilled. In short, skills are specific learned activities, while competencies are a combination of skills, knowledge, and behavior. Having experience means that you have done something specific. If we keep to the communication example, an example could be writing press releases. There are many forms of writing, but you would specifically be looking for someone who had written press releases, as opposed to have written other types of documents. After all, it would not necessarily help your MO if the only writing that your communications person has done has been technical manuals or even a novel.
Ooh, I can't see those mixing together very well.
Especially when you're looking for press releases. The council should be made up of people who have the specific required skills, competencies, and experiences. Decisions need to be made ideally by the council that is in place to identify exactly which skills, competencies, and experiences are required now and in the future. This should be based on the MO strategic plan.
We keep coming back to that strategic plan.
We really do. It's a key piece of work.
Yeah. That one in the Constitution.
Both of those work in tandem together to really create a strong council. Yeah. So you may ask yourself why defining skills, competencies, and experiences is so important. After all, many councils have members based on other positions they hold in the MO or because they work well in a group. Firstly, it is important for the leaders of the MO not to have two roles within the organization.
I almost think that one bears repeating. That one's an important
one. It is a toughie, isn't it? Yeah. Because as we said, your chief commissioner and the people that are on your board are your top volunteers sometimes.
And we all want to get involved and we all want to help out, and I think we all end up with wearing many, many hats.
Many hats. And when you choose to participate in certain roles, such as a member of the board, you kind of have to let those other hats go.
Only temporarily.
But only temporarily, because if you have listened to How to Build Our Best Board Ever webinar, your time in your role is only brief and fleeting, and you never get to stay in that role for a long period of time. So, also, you will need specific skills, competencies, and experiences to make sure that your council can successfully lead the MO into the future and guide it appropriately through any issues that will arise on the national level. The council members' focus should entirely be toward the future of the MO, not on operations, such as developing program, leading camps, fixing the office, all of those sorts of things.
I can imagine camp maintenance fits into that one too.
Absolutely. We regrettably often see situations where council members are elected because they have been with the MO for many years or because they're someone's friend. In cases like this, often their loyalty is to their past roles or to their friends. Their loyalty is not towards the MO of today. People who are elected based on skills, and when their skills are being used effectively, will be motivated to use those skills to improve your MO. And improving your MO makes your program opportunity stronger and gives you the opportunity to grow your membership. So, tell me a little bit about this council member skill inventory.
Yeah, so we've just talked about how skills are important and that it's important to have the right ones. And it's really important with that to know which council member has which skills. And that's what we really call doing the skills audit. And as you indicated before, that's part of the other webinar that we're doing.
Yeah.
But just to touch on it very briefly, because it is important as part of your top 10. It's looking to say, as I said, which council member has which skills. And we can do that in a number of different ways. One very simple one that you see up on the screen is to list the skills that you've identified as being the important skills that you require. Again, that's done by the council that's in place right now. And then just have members indicate if they have the skill and possibly their level of confidence within that skill. If it turns out that they're not very confident in a certain skill level, we'd certainly hope that that's not something they would then be put in charge in, because I certainly wouldn't be any good with the legal expertise side of things. But maybe this becomes a development area for them, an area where the council as a whole would decide that it's important to invest in that person to shore up that skill and to gain that one. As a whole, the council should have all of the required skills. And when you have this inventory of who has which skills, your member organization's in a much better position to plan for the succession. Or at the very least, they'll know which skills would need to be replaced if a council member leaves. Because don't forget, we can have people that leave, and we said it's up to the member organization to be able to assume or to know somebody that can take on that. So you need to know what skills you're losing when somebody leaves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for me, that sounds as if you're always continuously going to have to be looking at how we can make sure that people are developing.
Exactly. Ongoing development. Once you have the skills audit, you automatically have the skills gap. These are the skills you require, but that no member of your council has. Finding these skills should become the primary focus for the succession planning committee. In the meantime, it is possible to invite someone with those skills for a specific meeting or parts of a meeting, and only when those skills are needed.
Because you're not really making them a member of your council. You're simply saying, we're missing this skill. Can you come and help us?
They're a bit of an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of
absolutely.
An advisory panel or an advisory person.
Yeah, absolutely. Providing potential successors and current council members with the appropriate opportunities to develop and to fill key positions is critical. Despite putting significant emphasis on our volunteers having the right mix when they're elected, we know that training and development will only make them better. And that's absolutely what we want. And in a way, they get something more back by being a part of our organization. If you have a skills inventory and the gap analysis and know what skills may be lacking, this is a perfect place to start. Why not set up a specific training on a needed topic, or find a way for a specific council member or prospective volunteer to receive training? What about letting a prospective volunteer shadow a current council member or attend a specific event? Before you start securing time on a volunteer schedule, know exactly the training topic and your expectations for the volunteer. Be sure to communicate this information to the volunteer or council member. Remembering our NLDP training, brainstorming sessions are a great way to generate numerous ideas of how to involve people in ways to help them develop. As with our girls, it's not what we do with them, but how we do it. Help them develop to their highest potential through non-formal education.
I want that with the adults too.
I think the same thing can be said for adults.
I know, I like it that way.
I do too. We all like to have fun, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so what about term limits?
Oh, yes. We talked about it a little bit, about the fact that people need to move on at a certain point. And for those that may not be aware of it, your term limits should be found in your member organization's constitution.
I love that document.
To that document. It always comes around. So really what a term limit is that it defines the number of years that a council member can be in a specific position before they need to be reelected. It would also define how many times a council member can serve in the same role or be reelected to that same role. And there should be a limit for every role on your council. Exactly. If we use the example of WAGGGS at the international level, it's a term limit of 3 years with a limit of 2 terms. So in essence, that means that somebody cannot be on the committee or a world board for more than 6 years ever.
Yeah.
And so that's it. That's your time span.
This is your moment in time to have that role and to have an impact in that role.
Yeah. Now, let's make it clear. These term limits may be different for your member organization. We're not saying that they're 3 years everywhere. But it's just to give you the example of what that would mean. So take a look at what yours are. The advantage of having these term limits is that it encourages a continuous flow of fresh thinking, objectivity, and guiding or scouting member connectedness to the work of the council. It also allows a prospective council member to be aware of the required time commitment and for those in a position to know when, constitutionally, they must leave the position. So it's not like you're bringing somebody in and they think they're coming in for 3 years and then you can't find anybody to replace them, so they have to do a 4th year, a 5th year, a 6th year. They really know the scope of what they're getting themselves into. One word of caution, however, when you're drafting lengths of terms is that we really recommend setting it up in such a way that the new council members are brought into your council on a rotational basis. So you have new council members coming in year 1, others year 2, others possibly another year, rather than having your entire council at once, because that really helps you retain organizational memory and provide continuity for your council. So we've talked a little bit about term limits, but there's another part to it, which is actually position terms.
Exactly. It's important to keep a record of each council position, its length of term, the incumbent, and the year in which the council member was elected or appointed. In the MOs that we are working with, we've created a form with this information, with an additional column that includes the year of the next election and a notation if the person can serve more than one term or the maximum length of terms. By taking time to lay out this information on one sheet, it's an easy guide to the succession planning committee or the nominating committee at their greatest need. They know what changes that are coming up in the future. In the partial example, we are assuming a maximum of 3-year terms. If you were to do this, we would suggest you add the actual years rather than year 1, year 2, year 3. If you match this type of chart with the skills audit you've completed, you will know which skills your council will lose each year. Those are losses which are a known element of your succession plan. Remember though, even if someone can be reelected, doesn't mean they always will, or that they always want to be reelected. So we would recommend you plan as if they cannot be reelected or have chosen to move on. So elections.
Oh, that's a big one. And that's really the culmination of all the work that you've done. With regards to succession planning, you now have council members that are going to be elected at your annual general meetings or AGMs. Meetings such as those are actually constitutionally required, and this is where members of the community or of the guiding and Girl Scouting community have the opportunity to hear about the council's work, review the council's member organization's finances, approve future plans, and vote to fill any vacant council position. So it's a really big meeting. And it's imperative that the member organization have an election process in place that is transparent and fair and allows you to elect the best council possible so that your member organization can be as strong as possible.
Absolutely.
So a couple of things that we look at. Let's break it down. First of all, if we want to have the best election possible, we need to make sure that all the candidates and those that are voting have the information they need in order to make the best possible decision for themselves and for the organization. This means that all the candidates, including those that may be sitting for re-election, know well before the AGM the time commitment, the skills, the experience, and the expectations for the role for which they are thinking about being nominated for. They should have time to discuss this with somebody from your succession planning committee. It's not simply passing them a piece of paper and saying, here, figure it out. It should never be assumed, Marnie, as you've said, that a council member will automatically seek re-election.
True.
The succession planning committee should make sure that members eligible for re-election want to put their name forward. The voters also need to know what the council requires. It's twofold. First of all, it's knowing which positions are going to be vacant and up for election. So we have that from our lengths of terms. Part of it is also what the position does and what its required skills, competencies, and experiences are. That's how they're going to be able to select that one. But secondly, it's also what skills the council needs going forward from a global perspective, because there may be changing needs of your council, and they may need different skills on the council that they didn't have before.
Right.
And so if you've been able to identify those, what the voters need with that is which of those skills may already be filled by members whose term is not ending. Additionally, voters need information on each one of the candidates. This information can be general background, but more importantly, it should be what each candidate could bring to the council, their specific skills, competencies, and experiences. And this is equally as important for new candidates as it is for candidates seeking re-election. In fact, we actually recommend that there's an opportunity for the voters to know how those who have been on the council have performed their roles for the length of their term, and for those that are looking to be elected for the first time, how they plan on fulfilling their roles. Member organizations seeking to implement best practices should treat incumbent council members standing for re-election the same way as they treat new candidates, and determine if they're a fit for the member organization at that point in time. They may have been a better fit when they first got elected. Things may have changed. So you need to look at that one. Very often this is done through an interview with each candidate, and it allows the succession planning committee, sometimes at this point it's moved and does more of a nominating function, but then that committee, to make sure that each person's skills, competencies, experiences, and knowledge match the current vision, mission, and direction of the member organization, and that they're actually adding value to being on your council. And only those that do should end up on your voting ballot.
Absolutely. So what about committee renewal?
Because we're done our job, so that's it. We're out.
Right, we're done.
Stars.
No, because remember, succession planning is an ongoing process. So even though we focused our attention to the council, many of the principles also apply to the succession planning committee and the processes it's responsible for. Like any of the processes that an MO needs to do, the entire succession planning process should be reviewed and evaluated on a yearly basis. This is normally done following the annual general meeting. This assessment should include evaluating how effective the committee was in pre-identifying possible candidates, in providing the appropriate training and development, and having a fair and transparent election. This evaluation should result in written notes so the process can be improved or changed as required for the following year. The written notes also give the opportunity for the people that come behind the current committee to have all of their knowledge. Just as a council needs new members, so does the succession planning committee. And after an AGM, the committee would work with the council to identify and select new members. I think, much as we've said before, everyone is in a role for a certain specific amount of time. So I think we do a quick summary here and thank everyone for being a part of our top 10 list. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email at our addresses on the screen. And we would also recommend that you check out the WAGGGS Succession Planning Toolkit. This toolkit was a source for much of what we presented here today, but is also a great resource, and it is available in French, Spanish, and English. All right. Well, best wishes and good luck.